Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Over the years I have completed several scenarios by doing as little as possible. I beat Bumbly Bazaar with just 2 tiles, I beat Forest Frontiers by using just 1 tile, and I beat Sherwood Forest with just 3 clicks. This begs the question though, is the ultimate minimalist scenario challenge possible? Can you beat a scenario by just opening it and not doing anything? For this challenge I am using Open RCT2, but I am considering any scenario from both Rollercoaster Tycoon 1 and 2, which means we have a total of 146 scenarios to consider. These scenarios all have one of these 9 different goal types, which can be divided into 4 categories: guests, park value, profit and coaster building. There is also the have fun goal, but that doesn't have a win condition, so I'm not counting the few scenarios with that goal. Any park that requires you to build or complete coasters will be impossible by default, so we can toss away all parks with one of those 3 goals. Repaying your loan is also not going to happen if you cannot do anything, so that's also an impossible goal. The other park value goal is theoretically possible if you started with much more park value than you need, but no scenario has that, so we can also cross that one off the list. The profit goals are very similar. They are theoretically possible, but all scenarios with those goals start with either nothing or very little, so it's also not going to happen. Sherwood Forest is really close, as all you need to do is raise the price of the junior coaster quite a lot, but without doing that you won't beat it. This only leaves the guest goals. They are the most common goal types, but also the ones you often need the biggest parks for, especially since we cannot advertise in this challenge. Therefore, almost all of these scenarios will not be possible either, as you simply start with too little. Even a scenario with quite a few rides, like Crumbly Woods, has a soft guest cap of less than half of the guest goal. We need a scenario where you start with basically a complete park to get the highest soft guest cap compared to the goal possible. This leads us to the real parks. There are 8 of these, 3 from Rollercoaster Tycoon 1 and another 5 from Rollercoaster Tycoon 2. Six Flags Magic Mountain has a repay your loan goal, but the other 7 do have a guest goal. Some require it by a certain date with a park rating of 600 or higher, while others need you to keep your park rating above 700 the entire time. Both are possible, but the first one seems easier for a do-nothing challenge. And with seems easier, I mean it requires less luck, as it's not like we're doing anything. Earlier I mentioned the soft guest cap, which is the amount of guests that all your rides combined attract to your park. If you have more guests than the soft guest cap, your guest generation is cut in 4, so it's unlikely you go much over the soft guest cap. Therefore, it's only really possible to beat one of these scenarios if the soft guest cap that you start with is more or almost as much as the number of guests required for the goal. This is an overview of the guest goals and starting soft guest caps of the remaining 7 scenarios. It's immediately clear that all the Six Flags parks are impossible, as their guest cap is less than half of what you need. The 3 real parks from Rollercoaster Tycoon 1 are a different story though. Sure, none of them have a guest cap higher than the goal, but they're all quite close. Alton Towers is the closest, so let's start with it. Now comes the boring bit, well, for me at least. I sat down in front of my computer and let the park run at times 128 speed over and over again, hoping that this time something would be different. It was never different, as even though the park rating stayed high throughout, the guest count never got above 2400. This makes sense considering the soft guest cap, but it's still disappointing and it doesn't bode well for the other 2 parks, but let's try them anyway. Next up is Blackpool Pleasure Beach, which needs about 400 guests more than its soft guest cap. Once again, I spent quite a while staring at the bottom left corner of the screen while restarting the park over and over when things eventually went to pot. Unfortunately, it was once again no good, as the guest count never even eclipsed 3100 and the park rating also often went down very quickly. A low park rating lowers the guest generation, so once that happens the run is doomed. This only leaves Hyde Park, and I didn't have high hopes for it, but I had to at least give it a shot. This time though, things were different. The guest count starts at a nice 2069, which is almost the exact same as the soft guest cap, suggesting that we would not get many more guests, just like in the other two parks. However, even with the guest generation cut in 4, it was enough to increase the guest count significantly past the soft guest cap. It often reached the guest goal of 2500 within 2 years or sometimes even within 1 year. This seems great, but let's not celebrate too early, as the goal requires us to have that many guests at the end of year 3, not year 1. Usually sustaining a guest count isn't very difficult, but in this challenge the park rating is incredibly unstable. Many times I would be on course even to get more than 2600 guests, only to be defeated by the park rating dropping to 300. You see, the problem is that this park is quite large and we only have 7 handymen, one of which spends almost all his time mowing the lawn. Because of this, at some point it will inevitably happen that there is a puke or litter fest somewhere which doesn't get cleaned up for a while. The park rating doesn't really like that, so it falls harder than the Roman Empire, causing us to lose hundreds of guests. Often it also causes vandalism, which stays even after the mess is cleaned up. Once this happens, it's game over. I wasn't deterred though, I kept trying and trying. In at least 50% of the attempts I reached the guest goal at some point in the run, and I knew that if I was lucky enough with the handyman pathing it would be possible to beat it. Eventually I had a run where the park rating stayed very high throughout all 3 years, but somehow the guest count never peaked above 2500, despite it sometimes getting there in less than a year. At this point it became a little bit of an obsession. I wanted to complete the do nothing challenge no matter how long it was going to take. Sometimes it even became quite exciting, watching the park rating go up and down and cheering it on. After more than 100 attempts of just sitting there watching the park rating and begging it not to go down, it finally happened. In this run I managed to complete Hyde Park without doing anything. The park rating did dip below 600 a few times, but every time a handyman cleaned up the mess that caused it quick enough so that it did not have a big impact on the number of guests. Eventually I beat it quite comfortably with more than 2600 guests in the park. This answers the question in the title of this video. It is indeed possible to beat a scenario without doing anything. After completing Hyde Park, I remembered that there is another big park with a guest goal, Mega World Park. With a soft guest cap of 3405 and a guest goal of 3500, this park seems ideal for the do nothing challenge, but it didn't work. Since your park rating cannot be below 700 for more than 4 weeks, you often fail the scenario within 1.5 years. Once again, the problem for the park rating is litter and puke, which in turn makes the guests unhappy, which lowers the park rating even more. However, even when I used a cheat code to force the park rating to be 999 forever, I didn't manage to beat the scenario. There is something about Hyde Park that allows us to get significantly more guests than the soft guest cap, and I don't know what it is. I do know that it means that Hyde Park is the only park that you can beat without doing anything. If there is another park that you can beat without doing anything that I missed, please let me know in the comments. In the meantime, thank you all for watching and I will see you in the next video.